The world was told it was simple. Bon Scott drank too much, passed out in a car, and never woke up. But the deeper you look into that freezing February night in 1980, the less that story holds together. There are missing hours no one can explain, a friend whose account changed and then disappeared, and an investigation that ended far too quickly. After 45 years of rumors and silence, the night Bon Scott was found in that car is finally being re-examined, and what emerges is far more unsettling than anyone was prepared for. Ronald Belford Scott was born on July 9, 1946, in the small Scottish town of Forfar. His parents, Chick and Issa, had already lost a child, so Bon's birth brought relief and joy. He spent his early years above a bakery in Kirriemuir with his younger brother Derek, growing up in a quiet, traditional setting, far removed from the life he would later live. In 1952, post-war hardship pushed the family to emigrate to Australia under a government scheme. For £10 each, they boarded a ship and settled first in Sunshine, near Melbourne. Bon was just 6, and his thick Scottish accent made him a target at school. Rather than change, he leaned into it, earning the nickname Bon and learning early not to bend for anyone. The family moved again in 1956, this time to Fremantle, a rough port city in Western Australia. There, Bon found music. He joined a local pipe band, learned drums, and experimented with other instruments. But Fremantle also hardened him. By his early teens, he was running with gangs, known for fighting despite his small size. School didn't last. By 15, he dropped out, choosing Chuck Berry over classrooms. Bon worked a string of tough jobs: farmhand, crayfisherman, mechanic's apprentice, postman, bartender, often impressing employers, even winning apprentice awards. But none of it mattered much to him. Music was the goal. At the same time, his street life intensified. Between the late 1950s and early 1960s, he led one of Fremantle's toughest teen gangs, drinking, fighting, using drugs, and clashing with police. After a violent run-in, he tattooed the words, "Death before dishonor," across his lower stomach. For a teenager in early 1960s Australia, Bon Scott's attitude was risky and defiant. By 1963, it caught up with him. At just 16, he was arrested for stealing petrol and trying to flee police, then made things worse by giving a false name. Additional charges followed, and he was sent to Riverbank Juvenile Institution, a maximum security reform school for troubled teens. Riverbank was harsh. Days started at 6 a.m. with cold showers, discipline was strict, and fights were common. Many former inmates later described the place as violent and frightening. Bon survived by keeping his head down and focusing on music. He joined an inmate band, played drums, and even performed for visiting parents. After one show, he told his mother with a grin that he would be famous someday. He was released just before Christmas, with the most serious charge dropped. Trying to straighten out, he applied to join the citizen military forces, but was rejected as socially maladjusted. It didn't bother him much. By 1964, Bon was back in Perth with a drum kit and a goal. He helped form a band called the Spectres with John Collins, sharing duties as drummer and singer. They played beat and rock covers, leaning toward rougher blues influences. The band gained local attention and, in October 1965, recorded 4 songs for the TV show Club 17. Around the same time, Bon fell for Maria van Vlimmeren, a 17-year-old from a very different background. She became deeply involved with the band, even running their fan club. The relationship was complicated and disapproved of by both families, but for a while, it held. Bon Scott's early life was full of contradictions, and that tension followed him everywhere. On stage, he was loud, filthy, and unpredictable. Off stage, he could be gentle, quiet, and surprisingly thoughtful. Angus Young once called him the dirtiest person he knew, and that was true. But it wasn't the whole story. With Maria, Bon softened. He didn't drink or swear around her. They went to church together, and during work breaks, he'd dress up just to take her to lunch. On weekends, they watched bands or ate fish and chips by the water. It was a calmer version of Bond that few people ever saw. In late 1966, his life shifted again. The Spectres merged with another local band, the Winstons, forming the Valentines. The move paid off. With Bon Scott and Vince Lovegrove sharing lead vocals, the Valentines became one of Perth's hottest acts. They were young, stylish, and confident, and they enforced strict rules, including no girlfriends at gigs. Maria hated it and often showed up anyway, furious at Bon and the band. Success came fast. A cover of Every Day I Have to Cry climbed the Perth charts, and the band moved to Melbourne to chase bigger opportunities. Working with Harry Vanda and George Young of the Easy Beats, they found a slick pop sound that clicked nationwide. By 1969, hits like Juliet and My Old Man's a Groovy Old Man made them teen idols, touring alongside stars like Johnny Farnham and Russell Morris. Then it unraveled. In September 1969, police raided the band's rehearsal space in Jan Juk, Victoria, after weeks of surveillance. They found drug paraphernalia and marijuana, triggering Australia's first major rock band drug bust. The scandal made national headlines, and each member was fined and placed on a good behavior bond. Behind the scenes, the damage ran deeper. According to those close to the band, drug use didn't stop. It escalated. Bond didn't hide from the fallout. Instead, he leaned into rebellion, openly speaking about marijuana and calling for its legalization. In Australia in 1969, Bon Scott's outspokenness was risky. The Vietnam War was raging, youth culture was under pressure, and conservative leaders were tightening control. Bond didn't back down. He openly criticized the government's drug laws and, even more controversially for the time, spoke in support of gay rights, something almost unheard of among rock musicians then. For him, rebellion wasn't a pose. It was a belief system that would later define his persona in AC/DC. By 1970, the cracks were impossible to ignore. The Valentines were split over their future. Some wanted a harder rock sound, others clung to pop success. The drug bust deepened the divide. While a few tried to clean up, Bon kept partying, and the band's unity unraveled. In August 1970, despite strong fan support, the Valentines quietly broke up. Bon walked away from pop and moved to Adelaide, joining a progressive rock band called Fraternity. The shift was dramatic. Fraternity blended psychedelia, blues, and boogie, giving Bon space to evolve beyond teen idol pop. Over nearly 3 years, they released Livestock and Flaming Gala and earned serious respect on the Australian rock circuit. It was the most stable stretch of his career so far. That period also changed his personal life. At a fraternity gig in 1971, Bon met Irene Thornton, a grounded secretary far removed from his chaotic world. The relationship moved fast, and in January 1972 they were married, marking a rare moment of order in Bon Scott's restless life. Their relationship was intense and unstable. Friends said Bon and Irene fought just as fiercely as they made up. By late 1973, the strain was showing. Fraternity's UK tour had failed, money was running out, and Bon was drinking heavily and cheating. Their small Adelaide apartment became a battleground. After one especially vicious argument, Bon stormed out drunk on his motorbike, a warning sign of what was coming. By mid-1974, everything had collapsed. Fraternity had fallen apart, the marriage was unraveling, and Bon was broke and drifting. The UK tour had been meant to change everything. The band even renamed themselves Fang to sound tougher overseas, but reality hit fast. In Britain, no one knew them. At a show in Bournemouth, they opened for Status Quo and mocked the headliner's polished image, until Quo took the stage in denim and blew them away with sheer power and professionalism. It wasn't a fluke. Night after night, they were outclassed. The breaking point came on May 3, 1974. Bon arrived drunk to a Mount Lofty Rangers rehearsal, already furious after another fight with Irene. An argument erupted with Bruce Howe, tensions boiled over, and Bon stormed out. Keyboardist Peter Head begged him not to leave, warning he was too drunk to ride. Bon ignored him, smashed a bottle of Jack Daniels, jumped on his Suzuki GT550, and sped into the rain. Minutes later, at an intersection in West Croydon, Adelaide, Bon slammed head-on into a 1950s FC Holden driven by 17-year-old Lee Morgan. Visibility was poor, the roads were slick, and the impact was catastrophic. Bon was thrown through the windshield. Both vehicles were destroyed. Morgan, who would later become a respected community figure, never forgot that night. It altered his life forever. The next morning, the Sunday Mail ran the headline that stunned the local music scene. The injured biker was Bon Scott of Fraternity. Bon lay in a coma for 3 days, and no one knew if he would survive. When friends were finally allowed to see him, they barely recognized him. His face was badly damaged, his teeth were gone, and his body was covered in bruises and cuts. Peter Head later said Bon looked unrecognizable. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital. The injuries were so severe that when George Young later heard Bon's name mentioned as a possible singer for AC/DC, he dismissed it outright, convinced no one that badly hurt could ever perform again. Bon's brief time with the Mount Lofty Rangers was already over. He had played just 12 shows and recorded 2 songs, neither of which would be released until many years later. The crash didn't just shatter his body, it split his life in 2. His band was gone. His marriage was collapsing. The future he imagined no longer existed. During recovery, Bon took whatever work he could find, mowing lawns, painting houses, doing odd jobs to survive. At 27, he felt old, frightened, and convinced his shot at music was over. In October 1974, he left Adelaide behind and moved to Sydney, searching for a clean break from everything that had fallen apart. That second chance came through an old friend. Vince Lovegrove, his former bandmate from the Valentines, had started a small management company with his wife and brought Bon in to help around the office. Not long after, Vince got a call from George Young. AC/DC needed a new singer. Their current frontman, Dave Evans, was out. Vince immediately suggested Bon. George hesitated. Bon was older. He'd nearly died in a crash. But Vince pushed. He took Bon to see AC/DC play at the Paraka Hotel. Bon liked what he saw, but wondered if the band was too young. The Young brothers, meanwhile, thought Bon might be too old. Everything changed during a late-night jam session at Bruce Howe's place. They played for hours, and the chemistry was undeniable. Something clicked instantly. On October 24th, 1974, less than 6 months after nearly losing his life, Bon Scott officially joined AC/DC. Their momentum was unstoppable. High Voltage cracked Australia's top 20 in early 1975, and TNT climbed even higher, peaking at number 2. Songs like It's a Long Way to the Top and Jailbreak became national anthems. With perfect timing, their manager sent tapes and photos to London, where Atlantic Records executive Phil Carson took notice and offered a global deal. That single decision changed everything. By 1976, AC/DC was touring Europe, opening for giants like Black Sabbath, Kiss, Aerosmith, and The Who. The international release of High Voltage sold more than 3 million copies, launching the band onto the world stage. In 1979, AC/DC took their biggest gamble yet. Atlantic wanted a breakthrough hit, so the band brought in producer Robert John "Mutt" Lang, recording without George Young for the first time. In just 3 weeks in London, they made Highway to Hell. Released that July, it exploded, becoming their first U.S. million seller and reaching number 17 on the Billboard chart. It would go on to sell over 8 million copies and cement itself as a rock classic. For Bon Scott, it was the peak of his career and his final album. Bond's last weeks were a haze of music, touring, and excess. A C/DC wrapped the Highway to Hell tour on January 27, 1980, in Southampton. Soon after, Bond appeared on Top of the Pops and began sketching ideas for what would later become Back in Black. Off-stage, he was spending long nights out in London, often at the Music Machine Club in Camden, drinking heavily and moving through a loose circle of musicians, friends, and drug users. On the night of February 18th, Bond returned to the Music Machine and drank with friends, including Alistair Kinnear, a musician later linked to heroin use. Kinnear claimed Bond became so intoxicated he could barely function, so he placed him in his small Renault 5 around midnight. Unable to wake him, Kinnear said he called Bond's ex-girlfriend, Silver Smith, who reportedly suggested letting him sleep it off. Kinnear left Bond reclined in the car and returned the next morning. By then, Bond was cold and unresponsive. He was pronounced dead at King's College Hospital, with rigor mortis indicating he had died hours earlier. The coroner ruled the cause as acute alcohol poisoning, noting a blood alcohol level of 0.41%, more than 5 times the legal driving limit. The report stated he choked on his own vomit while unconscious, possibly worsened by a loose dental plate. No heroin or other drugs were detected, though later critics would question how reliable toxicology tests were at the time. Not everyone has accepted the official explanation of Bon Scott's death. Some believe alcohol alone doesn't tell the full story. A C/DC drummer, Colin Burgess, later said Bond didn't seem especially drunk the last time he saw him. Others point out that years of heavy drinking may have already damaged Bond's liver, leaving him far more vulnerable. In The Last Highway, author Jesse Fink raises another possibility, suggesting Bond may have been given heroin that night. He notes that Bond was surrounded by users, that witnesses described him as sluggish with unusually small pupils, and that rumors circulated about Alistair Kinnear supplying him. None of it, however, has ever been proven. There are also darker theories. Some fans believe Bond was deliberately abandoned, or worse. Kinnear's mysterious disappearance while sailing off the French coast in 2006 only fueled suspicion. Other rumors point to tensions within AC/DC, but these claims remain speculation. No solid evidence has ever supported murder or foul play. Bond's sudden death in early 1980 devastated the band. For a time, they seriously considered quitting. Then Bond's family stepped in, telling them he would have wanted AC/DC to carry on. They recalled Bond speaking highly of Brian Johnson, the singer from Geordie, saying he truly understood rock and roll. Just 2 months later, Brian Johnson joined AC/DC. In April 1980, the band flew to the Bahamas and recorded Back in Black. Released on July 25th, it wasn't just a comeback, it was an eruption. The black cover served as a quiet tribute to Bond. The album hit #1 in the UK, #4 in the US, and went on to sell an estimated 50 million copies worldwide. Bon Scott never saw what followed, but his legacy only grew. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with AC/DC in 2003. A year later, classic rock named him the greatest frontman of all time. Bands across Europe wrote songs in his honor, and in 2012, Back in Black entered the Grammy Hall of Fame, ensuring that Bond's voice, spirit, and defiance would never fade.